Welcome back to OpenLine, a fascinating topic tonight. We could talk much longer than an hour, but we are so grateful to have an hour with our guest tonight talking about HB 1944. Andrew, Kimberly, and Lindsey are all with us, have very unique perspectives on what this bill might do. Kimberly, I want to come to you. It's an interesting perspective, you know, being an author talking about this bill. I'm curious, what is it about this bill that really encouraged you to want to take part in the committee process of seeing what fate this legislation has?
Well, there's two things. There is, one is that while what we're hearing in the legislature is these discussions of pornography, what the books that kids are actually, the books that are being challenged are actually being challenged in general for a lot of different reasons. Moms for Liberty challenged 40 books in Williamson County elementary schools. The only one that was being challenged for sexual content was a nonfiction picture book about the life of seahorses, in which it was noted that the seahorse male carries the fertilized eggs and then gives birth, and that was considered a gateway to transgenderism. That was actually their complaint. I never personally have considered my life that similar to that of a seahorse, and I certainly didn't when I was 5. The other thing is I actually write books. Some of my books are about difficult subjects, and they're about child trauma. And from a writer's perspective, I wrote a book called Fighting Words, which won a Newbery Honor in 2021. And it is one of the very first books for middle grade, so that's 10 to 12-year-olds roughly, that talks about sexual assault head on in a realistic way for this age group. And I wrote that with extreme care for the sensibilities both of kids who have been abused, which, believe it or not, is about 1 in 5 in our society, and for kids that have not, for completely innocent children that are going to happen upon the book like the pretty cover. And so, you know, you don't want to terrorize anybody, and yet you want to be honest. There's a whole laundry list of language that I very carefully never, ever used in the book, including sexual and assault as words. We went through with child trauma specialists and made sure that we were accurate in how we were reporting things, but also that we were compassionate and not going to cause unnecessary trauma to any child. And I take this responsibility hugely seriously, and so does every other children's author that I know. None of us are talking about things as a way to just stir up, you know, things. We're writing to let kids know they're not alone. We're writing to let kids know that hard things happen to other kids besides themselves. We're writing for empathy. We're writing for, you know, really very good reasons. And I've already gotten letters from kids that said, after I read your book, I was able to tell my parents what was happening to me. I realized I wasn't the only kid that's happened to. And that's incredible. I mean, if you can write a book about a difficult subject and it helps one kid out, you know, that's what we have to do. There are statistics that say 40% of transgender kids attempt suicide, and that should never happen. They should know that they are as equally valued in this world as every other child. You know, I think that we have got to be able to talk about difficult things at an age-appropriate way. Nobody at all wants this to be inappropriate for children. We all want it to be, you know, right. And the books that they're reading, you know, Me and Errol and the Dying Girl, that's not being handed out to kindergartners. You know, that's a book for high school. Teachers are all very aware of age appropriateness. You know, it's some sort of hidden agenda at work here. It's really not about the books themselves, I don't.
Andrew, you have a unique perspective. In addition to being an author, you're also a Tennessean. You live here with us in Middle Tennessee. So I'm curious, from your perspective as a local, you know, what are your thoughts as this moves forward?
Yeah, and to you know, and also to answer the question you asked Kimberly about like why to get involved, and that's my reason. That, you know, as someone who's lived here 30 plus years, has kids school age right now. Initially, I was motivated by the attacks on librarians, you know, and as an author, I've visited schools in 25 states. I'm sure Kim's been to many more states than that. And librarians are wonderful people, you know, and they did not deserve to be compared to child molesters, as John Rich did, comparing them to someone pulling up in a white van, which was just completely outrageous, uncalled for, and yet he was receiving a warm welcome from the legislators there, and I thought that was just that was obscene to me, And then I also saw that kids are going to be the real losers here, missing out on a chance to read great books. And I think that the school library is probably the most welcoming place in the entire school for most kids. That's where they have a chance to read what matters to them, find the books that speak to them, as opposed to an assignment. Librarians are there to help guide them with books that they know will open them up to new worlds or to see their own lives reflected. And I hated to see this attack on librarians because of the impact it would have on kids. And Lindsey mentioned the term chilling effect earlier. And I think that regardless of the scope of this bill and its final form, and Chris, you mentioned all the attacks that there have been recently on teachers and librarians and schools, not to mention doctors and nurses, coming from the same people, attacking all these pillars of the community. And I worry about teachers and librarians just getting sort of fed up with this, tired of the hassle, and maybe not taking a chance on a really meaningful book because it might have some element of controversy to it, and they'd rather not deal with those parents. I think librarians are great, and I don't think they'll succumb to that, but you could certainly see it happening just for human nature, just to have a bit of an easier day maybe and not welcome these unfounded attacks.
Lindsey, you were talking. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Who tried to jump in there? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could chime in with one other thing. Every parent has a right to restrict their own child from reading a book. My children are adults now, and I really gave them pretty free reign over reading, but I remember my daughter was a precocious reader, and she read at fourth grade level before kindergarten, and there were times when I took, especially any book in which an animal died. And if an animal died, I had to take that book out of my daughter's hands or we were going to end up with sleepless nightmares and things. So you always have the right to say, this book is inappropriate for my child for whatever reason. And no librarian is going to contradict that. No teacher is going to contradict that. But you don't have the right to say, this book is inappropriate for everyone else's children. Because you don't know that.
And it's a question of values also. What values do you have as a parent? And what do you think is actually a danger to your child? Is a book a danger to your child? I would say no. The same person that sponsored this bill today or yesterday blocked, there was an attempt to ban corporal punishment in Tennessee schools, and Representative Sapicki blocked that. He's in favor of corporal punishment. I'd rather have my kid read a book in school than get hit by an administrator at the school. He also was the one that blocked the ability of the State Department of Health to promote vaccines, and not just the COVID vaccine, but any vaccine. I would rather my child be healthy than have that blocked. Other members of the committee that voted in favor of this legislation have proposed naming bills after Kyle Rittenhouse, who shot and killed people. They want to put guns in the hands of 18-year-olds, kids who might be in high school, right? And so, I think all those things are a much greater threat to our children than the books. And so you have to stand up and express those values when you get a chance.
Absolutely. Lindsey, I want to bring you back in. You are past president of the Tennessee Association of School Librarians. I imagine you have heard from librarians about this bill. What are some of the things you're hearing from members of the organization?
Overwhelmingly, we don't understand why this is needed when there's a process already in place and it's been in place for years. So we welcome when parents have a concern. I mean, that's part of our job. And so we can talk with the parent about the concern. If they are not satisfied, they may proceed with filling out their reconsideration form, and that sets the process in motion. So we don't understand why it's necessary. Number two, in the fiscal note of the bill, it mentions that, let's see, I've got it pulled up here, so I'm going to read it. In the fiscal note, it says, based on information provided by the Department of Correction, there have been 0 admissions of the Class E felony offense of obscenity in the past 10 years. So no one's been arrested for this. And so they're making legislation to create a process when a process exists for an issue that they've shown is not an issue. And so it just, we feel, causes redundancy and just a lot of confusion.
Absolutely. Important to note that this has not become law. It's still going through the committee process, but it has passed through at least a couple of committees through the process, which is certainly important to note. We need to fit in another break, but our conversation will continue right after that.